They say a woman scorned is dangerous, but a Luna betrayed? She becomes unstoppable. Tonight, you're about to witness the fall of a queen who should have stayed broken, except she didn't. She rose from the ashes, wearing a crown no man could steal. This is the story of Evelyn Drake, the woman who made an alpha king kneel. Stick around until the end, because this revenge is unlike anything you've seen before. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. Let me know where my wolf pack is watching from tonight. Petit? The grand hall of the Silver Fang stronghold blazed with torchlight and excess. Evelyn Drake stood at the edge of the celebration, champagne flute untouched in her hand, watching her husband laugh with a woman whose face she had never seen before. The Blood Moon Festival was supposed to honor the pack's strength, their survival through another brutal winter, their dominance over the Eastern Territories. Instead, it felt like a funeral she had not been invited to mourn at. Evelyn was 31 years old. She had been Luna of the Silver Fang Pack for 9 years. 9 years of standing beside Ronan Blackwood through border wars that left the snow red with enemy blood. 9 years of negotiating treaties while he postured and threatened. 9 years of holding the fractured alliances together with nothing but her family's name and her own spine. She wore a gown of deep crimson tonight, custom-made by artisans from the southern valleys. The fabric clung to her frame in all the right places, showing the body of a woman who trained with warriors and ran with wolves under full moons. Her dark hair was pinned in an intricate style that had taken 2 handmaids an hour to complete. She looked every inch the Luna, every inch the queen. But Ronan was not looking at her. He was looking at the blonde woman in the silver dress, the one who kept touching his arm and whispering things that made him smile. The one whose scent Evelyn had started noticing on his clothes 3 months ago. Evelyn's wolf stirred beneath her skin, restless and angry. She pushed it down. Control was everything. Emotion was weakness. That was what her father had taught her before the sickness took him. That was what her mother had shown her before the assassins came in the night. She drained the champagne in one swallow and set the glass on a passing servant's tray. Across the hall, Ronan caught her eye. For just a moment, something flickered in his expression. Guilt, maybe. Or annoyance that she was still standing there, still watching, still refusing to disappear the way he clearly wanted her to. He was a handsome man, she would give him that. 43 years old, with the build of someone who had earned his alpha status through combat, not inheritance. Dark hair shot through with silver at the temples, eyes the color of storm clouds, a jaw that could have been carved from granite. When they had married, she had been 22 and stupid enough to believe that strength and loyalty were the same thing. She knew better now. Ronan leaned down and whispered something to the blonde woman. She giggled, actually giggled, and Evelyn felt her wolf snarl inside her chest. Then Ronan was walking toward her, the crowd parting for him the way crowds always did for alphas. Men stepped aside. Women dropped their eyes. Even the musicians seemed to play quieter as he approached. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough to speak without shouting, far enough to make it clear this was not an intimate conversation. "Need to talk to you," he said. His voice was flat, businesslike, the tone he used when discussing supply lines or patrol schedules. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Now? In the middle of your celebration?" His jaw tightened. "Upstairs. 5 minutes." He did not wait for her response. He simply turned and walked toward the stone staircase that led to the private quarters, his boots heavy on the floor. People watched him go, then looked at Evelyn with expressions ranging from pity to curiosity to barely concealed satisfaction. She did not give them the pleasure of seeing her react. She simply smoothed her gown, held her head high, and followed her husband up the stairs. The hallway was quieter, the sounds of the celebration muffled by thick walls and heavy tapestries. Evelyn's heels clicked against the stone floor as she walked, each step measured and deliberate. She had walked these halls for 9 years. She knew every crack in the walls, every loose stone, every place where the torchlight did not quite reach. Ronan was waiting in his study, the room he had claimed as his own the day they married. It had been her father's study once, her grandfather's before that. 3 generations of Drake family leadership reduced to a space where Ronan kept his maps and his war plans and his secrets. He closed the door behind her, did not offer her a seat. "I'm making this quick," he said, leaning against his desk with his arms crossed. No point dragging it out. Evelyn stood perfectly still, hands clasped in front of her. "Go on." Ronan's eyes flicked to the window, to the door, anywhere but her face. I've taken a new mate. Her name is Celine. You'll meet her properly tomorrow, but I wanted you to hear it from me first. The words landed like stones in still water. Evelyn felt the ripples but did not let them show on her face. I see, she said quietly. And what happens to me? Ronan shifted his weight. You'll retain your title for the transition period. 6 months, maybe a year. We'll make it look like a mutual decision, a diplomatic separation. You'll be compensated, of course. Your family's territories will remain under Silver Fang protection. Evelyn almost laughed. Her family's territories, the lands her ancestors had bled for, the mountains and forests and river valleys that had belonged to the Drake bloodline for 2 centuries. Under Silver Fang protection, as if they were charity instead of conquest. How long? She asked. What? How long have you been planning this? Ronan's silence was answer enough. Evelyn nodded slowly. Does the council know? They will tomorrow. I'm making the announcement at the closing ceremony, in front of the entire kingdom. He met her eyes then, and there was something almost defiant in his expression. It's cleaner this way. No room for speculation or rumors, just the truth. The truth, Evelyn repeated. The truth is that you're exiling the woman who saved your pack from starvation during the famine. The woman who negotiated the truce with the northern clans when you were ready to march your warriors into a slaughter. The woman who gave you 9 years of loyalty while you built your power on the foundation of her family's name. Ronan's face hardened. I built this pack with my own hands. You built it with my family's alliances and my diplomatic skills, Evelyn said, her voice still quiet, still controlled. You were a good fighter, Ronan. You still are, but you were never a good leader. That was always me. His hand slammed against the desk, making the maps jump. You think you're so superior, don't you? So much smarter than everyone else. But you forget one thing, Evelyn. This world doesn't belong to the smartest. It belongs to the strongest. And between the two of us, I'm the one with the power. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. This man she had once believed she could build something real with. This man who had shared her bed and her plans and her vulnerabilities. This stranger wearing her husband's face. You're right, she said finally. You have the power. For now. She turned toward the door. Evelyn. She stopped but did not turn around. I'm not doing this to hurt you, Ronan said, and there was something almost pleading in his voice. I'm doing this because the pack needs new blood, new alliances. Celine's family controls the western ports. That's trade routes, supplies, leverage against the southern kingdoms. It's strategic. Everything is strategic with you, Evelyn said softly. Even cruelty. She opened the door and walked out, leaving him alone in the study that had once belonged to better men. The celebration was still going when she returned downstairs, but the music sounded different now. Sharper. Louder. The laughter felt like mockery. Evelyn moved through the crowd like a ghost, invisible despite her crimson gown and her Luna's crown. She found Marcus Thorne near the weapons display, nursing a cup of mead and looking like he would rather be anywhere else. Marcus was Ronan's captain of the guard, a scarred wolf in his 50s who had served 3 alphas and trusted none of them. He was one of the few people in this hall who had never lied to her. He looked up as she approached, his eyes narrowing slightly. Luna, I need you to do something for me, Evelyn said quietly. Marcus glanced around, making sure no one was close enough to overhear. What kind of something? The kind that stays between us. He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded once. When? Tonight. Before dawn. Dangerous timing. Evelyn smiled, and there was nothing warm in it. I'm aware. Marcus drained his mead and set the cup down with a decisive thud. What do you need? She told him, quickly, efficiently, leaving nothing out. Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. That's treason, he said finally, only if we lose. He almost smiled. You sure about this? No, Evelyn said honestly, but I'm sure about what happens if I do nothing. Marcus nodded. I'll have it done by morning. But Evelyn? What? After this, there's no going back. You understand that? She looked past him, toward the raised platform where Ronan sat with his new mate, the two of them laughing at some joke Evelyn could not hear. Celine was young, maybe 25, with the kind of beauty that did not need to be earned. She touched Ronan's hand like she owned it, like Evelyn had never existed. "I understand," Evelyn said, "better than anyone." Marcus left without another word, disappearing into the crowd like smoke. Evelyn stood alone near the weapons display, surrounded by swords and axes and spears that had tasted enemy blood. Her family's weapons, her grandfather's collection. Soon to be part of Ronan's trophy room. She reached out and touched the pommel of a ceremonial dagger, the blade engraved with the Drake family crest. A wolf's head crowned with stars. Her mother had carried this blade. Her grandmother before that. Women who had survived wars and betrayals, and men who thought strength was measured in violence. Evelyn lifted the dagger from its display. It was lighter than it looked, perfectly balanced. She turned it over in her hands, studying the engravings, the worn leather grip, the edge that had been sharpened so many times the blade was thinner than the smith had originally forged it. No one stopped her. No one even looked twice. She was still Luna, for now. She could take what belonged to her family. She slipped the dagger into the folds of her gown and walked toward the exit. The night air was cold against her skin as she stepped out onto the stone balcony. Below, the packland stretched out in all directions, hundreds of acres of forest and field and mountain territory that her family had protected for generations. Bonfires dotted the landscape, celebration fires that would burn until dawn. Evelyn leaned against the balcony rail and closed her eyes. Her wolf was pacing inside her, agitated and furious and ready to tear something apart. She let the feeling wash over her, did not fight it the way she usually did. For 9 years she had been controlled, diplomatic, the perfect Luna who never lost her temper or showed weakness. She was tired of being perfect. Footsteps behind her, light, careful, female. "You're Evelyn Drake." Evelyn opened her eyes but did not turn around. She knew the voice. Celine. The blonde woman came to stand beside her at the rail, her silver dress catching the moonlight. Up close, she was even younger than Evelyn had thought, beautiful in that effortless way that came from never having to fight for anything. "I wanted to introduce myself properly," Celine said. "I know this is awkward, but I thought—" "Save it," Evelyn said quietly. Celine blinked. "Excuse me?" "Whatever you came here to say. Whatever speech you practiced about how this isn't personal, or how you hope we can be civil, or how you're sure we can work something out. Save it. I don't care." Celine's perfect face twisted with something that might have been hurt or might have been offense. "I was trying to be respectful. Respect would have been not fucking my husband while I was still wearing his mark." The words hung in the cold air between them. Celine's cheeks flushed red. Whether from shame or anger, Evelyn could not tell and did not care. "He was never really yours," Celine said, her voice harder now. "You were a political arrangement. Everyone knows that. What Ronan and I have is real." Evelyn finally turned to look at her, this girl who thought she understood power. "Real," she repeated. "You think you're the first woman to believe that? You think you're special because he whispers promises in the dark?" "We're fated mates," Celine said, lifting her chin. "I've known since the first time we touched. The bond—" "There is no bond," Evelyn said flatly. "There's ambition and convenience and the fact that your father controls trade routes Ronan wants access to. You're a transaction, same as I was. The only difference is you're too naive to see it yet." Celine's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "You're just bitter because you're being replaced." Evelyn smiled, and it was the coldest thing Celine had ever seen. "I'm not being replaced, little girl. I'm being discarded. There's a difference. And when Ronan is done using you the way he used me, when your family's resources are bled dry and your usefulness runs out, you'll understand exactly what that difference means." She turned away from the balcony, from the bonfires, from the girl who thought she had won something. "Enjoy your victory," Evelyn said over her shoulder. "It won't last as long as you think." She left Celine standing alone in the cold and walked back into the warmth of the celebration, her head high, her spine straight, every inch the queen they did not deserve. The rest of the night passed in a blur of false smiles and empty conversations. Evelyn played her part perfectly. She laughed at jokes that were not funny. She accepted congratulations for a celebration that felt like a wake. She did not drink too much or cry or make a scene. She was the perfect Luna, right up until the moment the clock struck midnight and the blood moon rose full and red over the mountains. Then she disappeared. Marcus was waiting in the stables, 2 horses saddled and ready. He handed her a travel cloak without a word. Evelyn fastened it around her shoulders and mounted the smaller horse, a gray mare with good endurance and a calm temperament. "Everything ready?" she asked. Marcus nodded. "The documents are in the saddlebag, signed and sealed. Your mother's letters, too, the ones from the vault." Evelyn's throat tightened. "You found them?" "Hidden compartment, just where you said." Marcus's voice was gruff. "Your mother was smart. She knew this day might come." "They all did," Evelyn said quietly. "Every woman in my family knew that loyalty meant nothing when power was on the line." They rode out through the northern gate, the one that led into the deep forest where the patrol routes were thinnest. The guards on duty were Marcus's men, wolves who remembered when the Drake family ruled these lands with honor instead of fear. They looked the other way as Evelyn passed, their silence worth more than gold. The forest swallowed them whole. Trees that had stood for 1,000 years blocked out the moonlight, turning the path into a tunnel of shadows. Evelyn's horse picked its way carefully over roots and rocks, trusting its instincts more than sight. "How far?" Marcus asked from behind her. 3 days north," Evelyn said. "Maybe 4 if the weather turns. That's deep into unclaimed territory, wild lands." "I know. You know what lives out there too? Rogues, exiles, things that used to be wolves and aren't anymore." Evelyn glanced back at him. "You afraid, Marcus?" The old warrior grinned, his scarred face looking almost young in the darkness. "Terrified. But I'm more afraid of what happens if you stay here." They rode in silence after that, the only sounds the horses' hooves on frozen ground and the distant howls of wolves who belonged to no pack. Evelyn's mind raced with plans and contingencies, with the contents of her mother's letters and the names of allies who might still remember the Drake family's honor. But mostly she thought about Ronan's face when he realized she was gone. The panic when he understood she had not just disappeared, but had taken something with her. Something that could destroy everything he had built on the bones of her family's legacy. Dawn was breaking when they reached the river crossing, the sky turning from black to gray to pale gold. Marcus pulled his horse to a stop and turned in his saddle to look back the way they had come. "They'll follow," he said. "You know that." "Let them try," Evelyn said. "By the time they figure out which direction we went, we'll be ghosts." "And after? When you've done what you need to do?" Evelyn urged her horse forward into the icy water, feeling the current pull at the animal's legs. "After," she said, her voice carrying back over the sound of rushing water, "I'm going to take back everything they stole. And I'm going to make sure every wolf in this kingdom knows exactly what happens when you betray a Drake." The water was deep and cold and treacherous, but they made it across. On the far bank, Evelyn pulled her horse to a stop and looked back one last time at the Silver Fang territory, the land she had called home for 9 years, the pack she had served with everything she had. The blood moon was setting now, sinking below the mountains like a wound closing. By the time the sun was fully up, Ronan would make his announcement. He would stand before the council and the assembled packs and declare Celine as his new Luna. He would paint Evelyn's exile as a diplomatic necessity, a painful but required sacrifice for the greater good. And everyone would believe him, because that was what alphas did. They told convincing lies and called it leadership. But Evelyn Drake had learned something in 9 years of marriage to a man who valued power over truth. She had learned that the most dangerous lies were the ones people wanted to believe. And she had learned that the best revenge was not violence or anger or immediate retaliation. The best revenge was patience. Strategy. The slow, careful dismantling of everything your enemy held dear, piece by piece, until they were standing in the ruins wondering what the hell had happened. Ronan thought he had won. He thought exiling her was the end of the story, the final chapter in the tale of Evelyn Drake, the Luna who was not strong enough to hold her position. He had no idea he had just written the opening line of his own destruction. Marcus rode up beside her. "Ready?" Evelyn touched the saddlebag where her mother's letters waited. The documents that proved bloodlines and inheritances and secrets that powerful men had killed to keep buried. She touched the dagger hidden in her cloak, the blade that had belonged to Drake women who refused to die quietly. "More than ready," she said. They turned their horses north toward the frozen wilderness where civilized wolves did not venture, where the old laws still held and the ancient powers still remembered what it meant to honor a debt. Behind them, the sun rose over the Silver Fang territory, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Beautiful and terrible, like the dawn of a war no one knew was coming. Evelyn did not look back again. There was no point. That life was over. That woman who had stood quietly while men made decisions about her future, who had swallowed her pride and her power for the sake of peace, she was dead now. Buried in the snow beside the river crossing, unmourned and unremembered. What rode north into the wilderness was something else entirely, something that had been sleeping for 9 years, waiting for the right moment to wake up. And when the stories were told in later years, when the songs were sung about the fall of the Silver Fang Pack and the rise of the Wolf Queen, this moment would be remembered as the beginning, the point where Evelyn Drake stopped being a victim and became a reckoning. The cold wind cut through her cloak as they climbed higher into the mountains, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. Not a call to pack or a warning to enemies, just a long, lonely sound that echoed off the frozen peaks and faded into silence. Evelyn smiled. Let them howl, let them search, let them wonder where she had gone and what she was planning. By the time they figured it out, it would be far too late to stop what was coming. The northern wilderness did not forgive weakness. Evelyn learned that truth within the first hour of crossing into unclaimed territory. The temperature dropped so fast her breath turned to ice crystals in the air. The trees grew twisted and hostile, their branches reaching across the path like claws. Even the silence felt predatory, waiting for something to break. Marcus rode ahead, his eyes scanning the tree line with the wariness of a man who had survived too many ambushes to trust peace. Every few minutes he would raise his hand and they would stop, listening for sounds that did not belong. Footsteps that were too heavy. Breathing that was too close, the crack of a branch under weight that should not be there. They're watching, Marcus said without turning around. Have been since we crossed the river. Evelyn's wolf stirred beneath her skin, hyper alert. How many? Can't tell. Could be scouts, could be a hunting pack. Either way, they know we're here. Good, Evelyn said. Marcus did turn then, his scarred face skeptical. Good. I want them to know. I want every rogue and exile and forgotten wolf in these mountains to hear that a Drake is coming north. That the old bloodlines still remember what loyalty means. Marcus studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You're betting your life that they remember the stories. That they give a damn about honor from 2 centuries ago. I'm betting my life that they're tired of being forgotten, Evelyn said. That they want something to believe in again, even if it's just a ghost. And if you're wrong, then we die out here and Ronan wins. Simple as that. Marcus almost smiled. Nothing simple about dying. They rode on. The forest grew denser, the path narrower. Evelyn's horse picked its way carefully over frozen ground, its ears swiveling constantly, tracking sounds Evelyn could not hear. She kept one hand on the reins and the other near the dagger hidden in her cloak. Her mother's blade, the one that had drawn blood when soft words failed. The attack came at dusk. No warning, no sound, just movement in the trees and then wolves pouring out of the shadows like smoke given teeth. 6 of them, maybe 7, moving with the coordination of a pack that had hunted together for years. They circled the horses, cutting off escape routes, forcing Evelyn and Marcus into a killing ground with their backs to a cliff face. Marcus had his sword out before Evelyn could blink, the blade catching the last light of day. He positioned his horse between Evelyn and the largest wolf, a massive gray beast with scars across its muzzle and eyes that held too much intelligence to be simple animal. State your business, Marcus said, his voice hard. This is Drake territory under ancient law. You have no right to bar our passage. The gray wolf shifted, bones cracking and reforming, fur receding into skin. The transformation took seconds. When it was done, a man stood in the snow wearing nothing but scars and muscle and the kind of confidence that came from never backing down. He was maybe 50, maybe older, with gray hair to match his wolf form and a face that looked like it had been broken and healed wrong multiple times. Drake territory, the man repeated, his voice rough from disuse. There hasn't been a Drake in these mountains for 20 years, not since the wars. There is now, Evelyn said. She dismounted slowly, deliberately, keeping her movements non-threatening, but refusing to show fear. Her wolf was screaming at her to run or fight, the primal urge to survive overwhelming every rational thought. She crushed it down with pure will. Control was everything. Show weakness here, and she would not live to see morning. The man's eyes narrowed as he looked at her, taking in the quality of her cloak, the bearing of someone used to command, the mark on her neck that identified her as mated to an alpha. His nostrils flared, scenting the air. "You smell like Silver Fang," he said, "like Blackwood Pack politics and territorial games. What's a Luna doing this far north without her mate?" "Learning the difference between a pack and a prison?" Evelyn said. The other wolves had shifted now too, forming a semicircle of naked flesh and hostile stares. 3 men, 2 women, all of them carrying the kind of damage that came from being cast out. Broken bones that had healed crooked. Scars from silver weapons that never fully faded. Eyes that had seen too much suffering to trust anything that looked like hope. "Pretty words," one of the women said. She was younger than the others, maybe 30, with a brand mark on her shoulder that identified her as an exile from the Eastern Territories. "But words don't keep you warm out here. Don't fill your belly when the hunting is bad." "What do you really want, Luna?" Evelyn met her eyes without flinching. "I want to know if the stories are true. If there are still wolves in these mountains who remember what we were before the alphas carved up the territories and called it civilization." The gray-haired man laughed, a sound like stones grinding together. "What we were? We were tribes, clans, families that protected each other instead of selling each other out for trade routes and political leverage. That's what we were. And then your kind came along and decided might makes right." "My kind," Evelyn said softly, "didn't make that decision. My kind fought against it. My mother died trying to stop the consolidation wars. My father lost everything protecting smaller packs from being absorbed. The Drake bloodline has spilled more blood resisting alpha tyranny than you've seen in your entire life." Silence. The kind that felt like a held breath. The gray-haired man stepped closer, close enough that Evelyn could see the flecks of gold in his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands that spoke of old injuries that ached in the cold. He studied her face like he was looking for something specific, some sign or marker that would tell him whether she was telling the truth or just saying what he wanted to hear. "You got proof of that?" he asked quietly. "Or just more pretty words?" Evelyn reached into her cloak slowly, telegraphing the movement so no one would think she was going for a weapon. She pulled out the leather-bound journal her mother had hidden in the vault, the one Marcus had risked his life to retrieve. She held it out. "Read it yourself. Every page is a record of alliances my family built with rogue clans. Every name is a wolf who chose freedom over submission. My mother spent 30 years documenting the resistance, keeping track of who could be trusted and who sold out. That journal is worth more than my life. I'm offering it to you as proof that I'm not here to use you. I'm here to finish what my family started." The man took the journal carefully, like it might bite him. He opened it to a random page, his eyes scanning the handwriting. Evelyn watched his expression change from skepticism to shock to something that might have been grief. "I knew this name," he said, pointing to an entry. "Kara Nightshade. She was my sister. Died in the Northern Purge when the Alphas decided rogue packs were too dangerous to leave alive." "I know," Evelyn said. "My mother was there. She tried to warn Kara, tried to get her clan to retreat before the attack. But Kara wouldn't run. Said running was the same as surrender." The man's hand tightened on the journal. "How do you know that?" "Because my mother wrote it down. Every failure, every death she couldn't prevent. She documented it all so someone would remember, so the wolves who died resisting would not be forgotten." He looked up at her, and there were tears in his eyes. Actual tears, running down the face of a man who looked like he had not cried in decades. Why? Why would she bother? They were rogues, exiles, nobody important. "They were wolves," Evelyn said simply. That made them important. The silence stretched out, thick with tension, and the weight of decisions that could not be unmade. The other rogues were watching their leader, waiting for some signal. Evelyn could feel her fate balanced on the edge of this moment, could feel the cold certainty that one wrong word would end with her blood in the snow. Marcus shifted slightly in his saddle, his hand still on his sword. He could not protect her from 7 wolves, not even with his decades of experience. But he would die trying. She knew that without question. The gray-haired man closed the journal carefully and handed it back to Evelyn. "My name is Gareth Stoneclaw. I was beta of the Nightshade Pack before the Purge. These are what's left of my family. We've been running for 15 years, staying one step ahead of the territorial enforcers and the Alpha coalitions. We don't trust outsiders. We don't take risks. And we sure as hell don't help Lunas who smell like they just ran away from their rich Alpha husbands. Evelyn held his gaze. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to use me. I have information about Alpha movements, about weak points in territorial defenses, about supply lines and patrol schedules. I spent 9 years as Luna of the Silver Fang Pack learning everything Ronan thought I was too stupid to understand. I can give you targets, resources, a way to hurt the wolves who killed your sister. And what do you get out of it? The branded woman asked. Because nobody does something for nothing, especially not Lunas. I get an army, Evelyn said bluntly. I get wolves who are angry enough and desperate enough to follow a woman with nothing left to lose into a war that will probably kill us all. I get a chance to take back what was stolen from my family and burn down the system that makes wolves like you into disposable casualties. Gareth laughed again, but this time it sounded almost genuine. An army? You hear that? She wants an army. I heard, one of the men said. He was younger, maybe 25, with the kind of lean muscle that came from constant hunger. Question is whether she's crazy or stupid. Both, probably, Gareth said, but crazy and stupid might be exactly what we need. He looked back at Evelyn, his expression unreadable. You understand what you're asking for? You're asking rogues and exiles to go to war against established packs, against alphas with armies and resources and territory. Most of us will die. The ones who survive will be hunted for the rest of their lives. There's no going back from this. I know, Evelyn said. I crossed the river knowing exactly what I was asking. And I'm not asking you to die for me. I'm asking you to die for yourselves. For every wolf who got cast out for being inconvenient. For every pack that got erased because they refused to bend the knee. For every name in that journal who deserved better than being forgotten. Gareth studied her for a long moment, then looked at his wolves. They had a silent conversation, the kind that happened between pack members who had survived together for years. Subtle shifts of posture, brief eye contact, the language of wolves who trusted each other more than words. Finally, Gareth nodded. We'll take you to the settlement. Let the council decide if you're worth the risk. But I'm warning you, Luna, you try to manipulate us or use us as disposable soldiers, and I'll kill you myself. Sister's memory or no sister's memory. Fair enough, Evelyn said. They traveled deeper into the mountains, following paths that were not quite trails, just spaces between trees where the snow was packed down from repeated passage. The rogue wolves moved like ghosts, utterly silent despite their size. Evelyn tried to match their pace, tried to move with the same economy of motion, but her body was not used to this kind of travel. She had spent 9 years in halls and council chambers, not wilderness. Her thighs burned, her lungs ached from the cold air. Her fingers were numb despite her gloves. But she did not complain, did not ask to rest, did not show any sign that she was struggling. Because weakness here meant death, and she had not come this far to die in the snow like some soft-pack Luna who could not survive outside her comfortable territory. Marcus rode beside her, his presence steady and reassuring. He did not speak, did not offer encouragement or advice. He just stayed close, a reminder that she was not completely alone in this. The settlement appeared without warning, hidden in a valley between two peaks where the wind could not reach, and the trees grew thick enough to hide smoke from cooking fires. It was not much. Maybe 30 structures, a mix of crude cabins and reinforced tents, a central fire pit where wolves gathered for warmth and food, storage areas dug into the hillside where supplies could be kept frozen and safe. But it was more than Evelyn had expected. This was not just a temporary camp. This was a community. Wolves who had chosen to build something together instead of just surviving alone. Children played in the snow, their laughter sharp and bright in the cold air. Older wolves worked on repairing shelters or preparing food or crafting weapons from salvaged materials. Everyone stopped what they were doing as Gareth led Evelyn and Marcus into the settlement, their eyes wary and calculating. A woman emerged from the largest cabin, gray-haired and straight-backed with the kind of presence that commanded attention without effort. She wore simple furs and leather, nothing decorative, nothing that marked her as special. But every wolf in the settlement turned to watch her approach, waiting for her judgment. This is Mira Ashwood, Gareth said. She leads the council. Mira, this is Evelyn Drake. She claims to be here to start a war. Mira's eyes were the color of flint, hard and sharp and uncompromising. She looked Evelyn up and down, taking in every detail, every weakness, every potential threat. Then she looked at Marcus, at the sword on his hip, and the scars on his face, and the way he positioned himself to protect Evelyn even here, surrounded by hostile wolves. "Evelyn Drake?" Mira said slowly. "I knew your mother. She came here once, before you were born. Brought supplies during a hard winter when the hunting had failed and half our pups were starving. She didn't ask for anything in return. Didn't demand loyalty or gratitude. Just gave us what we needed and left." Evelyn's throat tightened. "I didn't know that. Most people didn't. Your mother was careful about the help she gave. Didn't want the alphas knowing she was supporting rogues. She understood the kind of danger that would bring." Mira stepped closer, close enough that Evelyn could see the lines around her eyes, the gray in her hair, the calluses on her hands from a lifetime of hard work. She smelled like wood smoke and pine sap and the deep cold of the mountains. "So tell me, Evelyn Drake, are you your mother's daughter? Or are you just another Pack Luna playing at Rebellion because your alpha husband traded you in for a younger model?" The words were designed to sting, to provoke a reaction. Evelyn felt her wolf snarl, felt the urge to defend herself, to list all the things she had sacrificed and survived. She crushed it down. Mira was testing her, looking for signs of ego or entitlement, or the kind of pride that made alphas dangerous. "I don't know if I'm my mother's daughter," Evelyn said honestly. "She was better than me. Braver. She died trying to protect wolves who could not protect themselves. I spent 9 years compromising and negotiating and telling myself I was being strategic when really I was just too afraid to fight. So no, I'm probably not the woman my mother was. But I'm trying to be." Mira's expression did not change. "And the war you want to start? What's that really about? Revenge against the alpha who exiled you? Or something bigger?" "Both," Evelyn said. "I won't lie and pretend this isn't personal. Ronan Blackwood destroyed my life and stole my family's territory. I want him to pay for that. But I also want every alpha in this kingdom to understand that wolves are not disposable, that packs are not property to be traded and consolidated, that there are still bloodlines who remember what we're supposed to be." "And what are we supposed to be?" Mira asked. "Free," Evelyn said simply. The settlement was silent. Even the children had stopped playing, sensing the weight of the moment. Evelyn could feel dozens of eyes on her, could feel the collective judgment of wolves who had every reason not to trust her. Mira turned to Gareth. "You believe her?" "I believe she's desperate," Gareth said, "and I believe she's angry. Whether that's enough to make her trustworthy, I don't know. But she brought her mother's journal, the real one, not a copy. That counts for something." Mira nodded slowly. She looked back at Evelyn. "You can stay. For now. Prove you're useful and we'll see about the rest. But understand this, Luna. We're not your soldiers. We're not your servants. If you want an army, you're going to have to earn it the same way everyone else here earns their place. Through work and sweat and showing up when things are hard." "I understand," Evelyn said. "Good. Gareth will show you where you can sleep. We eat together at sunset. Don't be late." Mira turned and walked back to her cabin without another word, the conversation clearly over. The other wolves slowly returned to their tasks, though Evelyn could feel their attention still on her, watchful and skeptical. Gareth gestured for them to follow. The cabin he led them to was small and drafty, with a single room barely large enough for 2 sleeping pallets, and a fireplace that looked like it had not been cleaned in months. But it had a roof and walls and a door that latched, which was more than Evelyn had expected. "It's not much," Gareth said, reading her expression. "But it's warm and it's private. That's luxury out here." "It's perfect," Evelyn said, and meant it. Marcus started unpacking their supplies, his movements efficient and practiced. Gareth watched him for a moment, then looked back at Evelyn. "You really think you can do this? Take on the alphas with nothing but rogues and exiles?" "I think I don't have a choice," Evelyn said. "And I think neither do you. The alphas are getting stronger, more organized. How long before they decide rogue settlements are too much of a threat to tolerate? How long before they send enforcers to wipe you out the way they wiped out the Nightshade Pack?" Gareth's jaw tightened. "We've lasted this long. By hiding. By running. By making yourselves small and forgettable. That's not living, Gareth. That's just dying slowly. And your way? That's dying quickly." "Maybe," Evelyn said, "but at least we'll die fighting." Gareth stared at her for a long moment, then then shook his head. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met or the most foolish. I haven't decided which yet. Can it be both? He almost smiled. Sunset meal is in 2 hours. Don't make Mira wait. He left, closing the door behind him. Evelyn stood in the middle of the small cabin, feeling the weight of everything she had just committed to. No turning back now. No safe retreat. She had just asked a settlement of desperate, traumatized wolves to trust her with their lives. And if she failed, if her plan fell apart, or her courage broke, they would all pay the price. Marcus finished unpacking and started building a fire in the fireplace, coaxing life from damp wood and old kindling. The flames caught slowly, reluctantly, but eventually grew strong enough to push back the cold. You did well, he said without looking at her. Mira's not easy to impress. I didn't impress her. I just convinced her I might be useful. Same thing out here. Marcus sat back on his heels, watching the fire. You really think this can work? Building an army from rogues? Evelyn moved to the window, looking out at the settlement. Wolves moving through the snow, carrying water and wood and supplies. Children helping with tasks too big for their small hands. Elders sitting by fires, their faces carved with the kind of wisdom that came from surviving what should have killed them. These wolves have nothing, she said quietly. No territory, no protection, no future except more running and hiding. If I can give them something to believe in, something worth fighting for, they'll be more dangerous than any pack army, because they'll have nothing left to lose. And when it's over, when the alphas are defeated, or you're dead, or the whole thing falls apart, what happens to them then? I don't know, Evelyn admitted, but it has to be better than this. Better than hiding in the mountains waiting for the day the enforcers find them. Marcus nodded slowly. Your mother would have said the same thing. Evelyn turned to look at him. You knew her well. Well enough. She was the one who recruited me, actually. I was just a young wolf running patrols for a minor alpha who treated his warriors like meat. Your mother showed up one day and offered me a position in the Drake household. Said she needed wolves who thought for themselves instead of just following orders. And you said yes. I said no at first. Thought it was a trick or a test. But she kept coming back, kept offering, until finally I realized she was serious. Best decision I ever made. Why? Evelyn asked. What made serving my family different? Because your mother understood something most alphas don't. She understood that loyalty is earned, not demanded. That wolves fight harder for leaders who actually give a damn about them. She treated her warriors like people, not weapons. We would have died for her. Some of us did. Evelyn felt tears prick at her eyes, but refused to let them fall. I wish I had known her better. I was so young when she died. She knew, Marcus said gently. She knew you would be something special. She used to say you had her spine and your father's heart, that you would either change the world or burn it down trying. Looks like she was right. Looks like. They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire grow stronger. Outside, the settlement continued its rhythm, wolves adapting to the presence of strangers the way they adapted to everything else, with caution and practicality and the kind of resilience that came from having no other choice. Evelyn thought about her mother, about the woman who had died trying to protect wolves she barely knew, about the legacy of resistance and compassion that Evelyn had inherited along with the bloodline and the name, about the weight of expectation she had spent 9 years trying to avoid. No more avoiding, no more compromising, no more pretending that being careful was the same as being brave. She had crossed the river. She had entered the wilderness. She had asked desperate wolves to believe in her. Now she had to prove she was worth that belief. The sunset meal was held around the central fire pit, dozens of wolves gathering in the cold with bowls of thin stew and hard bread. It was not much food, barely enough to keep everyone fed, but it was shared equally. No one got more because of rank or status. Everyone ate together, shoulder to shoulder, reminding themselves they were still pack, even if they had no territory. Evelyn sat with Marcus on the edge of the gathering, watching the dynamics. Mira sat at the head, not elevated or special, just present and attentive. Gareth sat nearby, his eyes constantly scanning the perimeter out of habit. The branded woman from earlier sat with a group of younger wolves, telling some story that made them laugh despite the cold and hunger. A small girl approached Evelyn, maybe 6 years old, with wide eyes and tangled hair. She held out a piece of bread, half of her own portion. Mama said you're a drake, the girl said shyly. Is that true? Evelyn took the bread carefully. It is. Mama says your family helped wolves like us, that you're good people. I hope so, Evelyn said. What's your name? Lily. I'm going to be a warrior when I grow up. Yeah? What kind of warrior? The kind that protects people. The kind that doesn't let bad wolves hurt my friends. Evelyn's throat tightened. That's the best kind of warrior. Lily smiled, gap-toothed and bright, then ran back to her mother. The woman who had sent her daughter over nodded at Evelyn across the fire, a silent acknowledgement that might have been respect or might have been a test. Evelyn nodded back. Mira stood, and the settlement fell quiet. She did not raise her voice or demand attention. She just stood, and everyone knew to listen. We have guests tonight, Mira said. Evelyn Drake and Marcus Thorne. They come asking for help starting a war against the Alphas. I've decided to let them stay and make their case, but the decision about whether we join them belongs to all of us, not just the Council. So over the next few days, talk to them, ask your questions, decide for yourselves if this is a fight worth having. She sat back down. No dramatic speech, no rallying cry, just facts and trust that her wolves would make their own choices. That night, alone in the cabin with the fire burning low, Evelyn pulled out her mother's journal and read by flickering light. Page after page of alliances and failures, of wolves who had resisted and wolves who had been crushed, of hope maintained in the face of overwhelming odds. On the last page, in her mother's careful handwriting, was a single sentence. The world breaks us all, but some of us become strong in the broken places. Evelyn traced the words with her finger, feeling the indent where the pen had pressed into the paper. Her mother had written this knowing she might not survive, knowing her daughter might one day need these words when everything else was gone. I'll make you proud, Evelyn whispered to the empty room. I promise. Outside, wolves howled at the moon, not in mourning or warning, just to remind themselves they were still alive, still here, still refusing to disappear quietly into the dark. Evelyn closed the journal and lay down on the sleeping pallet, her body exhausted but her mind racing. Tomorrow she would start building her army. Tomorrow she would begin the slow work of earning trust and proving herself worthy of the loyalty these wolves might give. Tomorrow she would take the first real step toward becoming the weapon Ronan had been too stupid to see. But tonight, she let herself be just a woman in a freezing cabin in the middle of nowhere, betting everything on a desperate plan that would probably get her killed. She fell asleep with her hand on her mother's dagger and a wolf's howl echoing through her dreams, calling her toward a future she could not yet see but refused to stop fighting for. 3 weeks in the settlement changed Evelyn in ways she had not anticipated. Her hands developed calluses from chopping wood and hauling water. Her muscles ached from training with warriors who did not pull their punches because she was a woman or a former Luna. Her lungs adapted to the thin mountain air until she could run the perimeter without gasping like a drowning woman. But the physical transformation was nothing compared to what was happening inside her mind. Every morning she woke before dawn and joined the hunting parties, learning to track prey through snow that revealed every mistake. Every afternoon she sat with Mira and the council, sharing intelligence about alpha movements and territorial weaknesses. Every evening she trained with whoever would spar with her, absorbing bruises and bloody noses, and the hard lessons that came from fighting wolves who had survived by being meaner and faster than their enemies. The settlement wolves watched her with cautious curiosity at first, waiting for her to break or complain or reveal herself as just another soft-pack Luna playing at rebellion. But Evelyn did not break. She showed up. She worked. She bled alongside them and never asked for special treatment. Slowly, grudgingly, they began to accept her. Gareth was the first to offer real training, taking her aside after a particularly brutal sparring session where she had been knocked flat 3 times in 5 minutes. He taught her dirty fighting, the kind that had no honor but kept you alive. How to use smaller size as an advantage. Where to strike to disable instead of kill. How to read an opponent's intentions in the shift of their weight. You're thinking too much, he said one afternoon, circling her in the practice area while other wolves watched. Stop trying to be elegant. Fighting isn't art. It's survival. Evelyn wiped blood from her split lip and adjusted her stance. Easy for you to say. You've been doing this your whole life, and you've been doing politics your whole life. Same principle. Find the weakness and exploit it without mercy. He lunged. Evelyn sidestepped, but not fast enough. His fist caught her ribs, driving the air from her lungs. She went down hard, snow cold against her face. Again, Gareth said. She got up. He knocked her down. She got up again, and again, and again, until her body was one massive bruise and her pride was shredded, and the only thing keeping her upright was pure stubbornness. That's it, Gareth said when she finally landed a solid hit to his jaw. That's the wolf I was looking for. The one who doesn't quit even when she should. Evelyn spat blood into the snow. I hate you right now. Good. Hate keeps you sharp. Marcus watched these sessions with the quiet approval of a man who knew the value of hard lessons. He spent his time reinforcing the settlement's defenses, teaching younger wolves tactical thinking, sharing knowledge earned through decades of service to leaders who actually deserved loyalty. In the evenings, when the settlement gathered for the meager communal meal, Evelyn began to understand the true scope of what she was asking these wolves to do. They were not soldiers. They were survivors, mothers protecting children, fathers who had lost everything, young wolves who had been cast out for the crime of being inconvenient. They had built lives here in the frozen wilderness, fragile and hard-won lives that her war would destroy. And yet they listened when she spoke. They asked questions. They began to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a way to fight back that did not end in complete annihilation. Lily, the small girl who had shared her bread that first night, became Evelyn's shadow. She followed her everywhere, asking endless questions about the outside world and what it was like to live in a real pack with territory and laws. Evelyn answered as honestly as she could, not sugarcoating the brutality but not crushing the child's hope either. One evening, as Evelyn was sharpening her mother's dagger by firelight, Lily sat down beside her with the serious expression children get when they are about to say something important. My mama says you're going to make the bad alphas pay for what they did. Evelyn paused mid-stroke. That's the plan. Good. Lily's small face was fierce. Because they killed my papa, sent enforcers to our territory and killed everyone who wouldn't submit. Mama and me barely escaped. I'm sorry, Evelyn said quietly. I'm so sorry that happened to you. It's okay. Lily watched the blade catch firelight. When I grow up, I'm going to help you. I'm going to be strong like you and make sure no more papas get killed. Evelyn's throat closed. She reached out and pulled the child into a hug, feeling small arms wrap around her neck with desperate strength. In that moment, the weight of what she was doing became unbearably real. These were not abstract concepts or strategic assets. These were lives, futures, children who deserved better than a world where survival meant hiding in the mountains. I promise, Evelyn whispered into Lily's tangled hair. I promise. I'll do everything I can to make it better. She meant it, even knowing the promise might be impossible to keep. The messenger arrived on the 23rd day. A rogue wolf from the Eastern Territories, half frozen and exhausted, carrying news that spread through the settlement like poison. Ronan had made his announcement. Evelyn was officially exiled, declared a traitor to the Silver Fang Pack. Her family's territories had been absorbed completely. The Drake name was stripped of all honors and protections. Anyone found harboring or assisting her would be executed. But that was not the worst of it. The worst of it was that Ronan had formed an alliance with 3 other major alphas, creating a coalition specifically designed to hunt down and eliminate rogue settlements. They were calling it a security initiative, a necessary measure to protect civilized territories from the growing threat of lawless wolves. In reality, it was a death sentence for every rogue pack in the northern wilderness. Mira called an emergency council meeting that night. The small cabin that served as their headquarters was packed with angry, frightened wolves who understood exactly what this alliance meant. No more hiding, no more running. The alphas were coming to wipe them out. We have maybe 2 weeks before the first enforcers reach this far north, Gareth said, his voice grim. Maybe less if they push hard. We need to evacuate. Scatter. Make ourselves invisible again. We've been invisible for 15 years, the branded woman said. Her name was Kira, and she had become one of Evelyn's fiercest supporters. It hasn't saved us. It's just prolonged the inevitable. So what do you suggest? Another council member demanded. We fight? We're barely 300 wolves, half of them children or elders. They'll slaughter us. Not if we strike first, Evelyn said. The room went quiet. All eyes turned to her. Mira's expression was unreadable. Explain. Evelyn stood, moving to the crude map spread across the table. It showed territorial boundaries, packlands, known patrol routes. She had been studying it for 3 weeks, memorizing every detail, looking for vulnerabilities. Ronin's alliance is new. That means it's fragile. The Alphas don't trust each other any more than they trust us. They're only working together because we represent a common threat. If we can disrupt that unity, make them turn on each other, the alliance falls apart. How? Gareth asked. We hit their supply lines, hard and fast. Make it look like one Alpha is sabotaging the others. Plant evidence, create confusion, force them to question each other's loyalty. That's incredibly risky, Mira said. Everything is risky, Evelyn countered. But if we do nothing, we die. At least this way we die fighting. The council argued for hours. Some wolves wanted to run. Some wanted to fight. Some wanted to surrender and hope for mercy that would never come. But slowly, grudgingly, they came around to Evelyn's plan. Not because it was safe or smart, but because it was the only option that did not feel like complete defeat. They would strike in 5 days. Small teams hitting multiple targets simultaneously. Warehouses, supply depots, communication posts. Create chaos and disappear before the Alphas could organize a response. It was desperate. It was dangerous. It was exactly the kind of plan that got wolves killed. But it was also their only chance. The next 4 days were a blur of preparation. Weapons were sharpened, routes were planned, teams were organized based on skills and experience. Evelyn worked alongside everyone else, her hands blistered from grinding blades, her voice hoarse from drilling tactics. Marcus pulled her aside on the 3rd day, his expression troubled. You're asking these wolves to commit acts of war. You understand what happens if we're caught? It won't just be execution. It'll be torture. Examples made, families punished. I know, Evelyn said. And you're still going through with it? I don't have a choice. Neither do they. Everyone has a choice, Marcus said quietly. The question is whether you can live with the consequences. Evelyn met his eyes. Can you? Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. I followed you this far. I'll follow you the rest of the way. But Evelyn, if this goes wrong, it won't. You can't promise that. No, she admitted, I can't. The strike was set for midnight on the 5th day. 3 teams, 3 targets, coordinated timing. Evelyn would lead one team herself, hitting a supply depot on the eastern border of Silver Fang territory. Gareth would take the 2nd team north. Kira would lead the 3rd west. The night before the operation, Evelyn could not sleep. She lay on her pallet, staring at the ceiling, listening to Marcus's steady breathing from across the room. Her mind raced through every possible scenario, every point of failure, every consequence. She thought about Lily and the other children, about the mothers and fathers who were trusting her with their lives, about her own mother, who had died trying to protect wolves she barely knew. The weight was crushing, but she bore it because someone had to. Just before dawn, she finally drifted into an uneasy sleep. Her dreams were full of blood and fire and the sound of wolves howling in the dark. She woke to chaos, shouting outside, the clash of weapons, the sharp crack of gunfire that meant silver bullets and enforcers. Evelyn was on her feet before she was fully conscious, grabbing her dagger and bursting out of the cabin. The settlement was under attack, not in 5 days when they were ready. Now. Enforcers pouring out of the trees, dozens of them, armed with silver weapons and the kind of military precision that spoke of Alpha Coalition planning. How did they find us? Evelyn screamed over the noise. Marcus appeared beside her, sword already bloody. Does it matter? We need to evacuate the children. They tried. But the enforcers had positioned themselves to cut off escape routes, herding the settlement wolves into killing zones with practiced efficiency. This was not a random patrol. This was a coordinated assault. Someone had told them exactly where to strike. Evelyn fought her way toward the center of the settlement, where Mira was organizing a desperate defense. Wolves were dying, children were screaming. The air smelled like blood and silver and burning wood. She saw Lily's mother go down, a silver blade through her chest. Saw the small girl try to drag her mother's body to safety, tears streaming down her face. Evelyn reached them, scooping Lily up with one arm while defending with the other. The child was sobbing, calling for her mama, not understanding that her mama was gone. Marcus! Evelyn shouted. Take her! Marcus grabbed Lily and ran, heading for the emergency escape route they had prepared but never expected to use. Evelyn turned back to the fight, her dagger slick with blood that was not her own. Gareth appeared through the smoke, his face a mask of fury and grief. It's over. We can't hold them. We need to run. Not without Mira. She's already gone. Taken a group north to draw them off. She said to tell you this wasn't your fault. The words landed like a physical blow. Evelyn looked around at the burning settlement, at the bodies in the snow, at everything she had destroyed by bringing her war to these people. Then she saw him, standing at the edge of the fight, clean and untouched, watching the slaughter with cold calculation. Ronan. Their eyes met across the carnage. He did not smile, did not gloat, just watched her with the expression of a man who had won a chess game he had been planning for weeks. Understanding crashed over Evelyn like ice water. The messenger. The one who brought news of the alliance. He had not been a rogue at all. He had been a plant, a spy sent to confirm their location and count their numbers, and she had welcomed him, fed him, let him see their defenses and their strategies. She had led the slaughter right to their door. Gareth saw her expression. Evelyn, no, don't. But she was already running, straight at Ronan, straight at the man who had orchestrated this massacre. She made it 10 feet before enforcers surrounded her, silver weapons pressed against her throat, hands yanking her arms behind her back, her dagger torn from her grip and thrown into the snow. Ronan walked toward her slowly, picking his way through bodies like he was strolling through a garden. When he reached her, he studied her face with clinical interest. I have to admit, he said quietly, I'm impressed. You lasted longer than I expected, built something real up here, made them believe in you. Evelyn strained against the hands holding her, her wolf snarling and clawing to get free. You killed children. I eliminated a threat. His voice was utterly calm. You think I didn't know what you were planning? I've been tracking you since you left, waiting for you to gather all the rogues in one place so I could deal with the problem efficiently. This wasn't a problem, Evelyn spat. These were people. These were lawless wolves who refused to submit to proper authority. Now they're examples. Lessons for anyone else who thinks rebellion is a viable option. Marcus burst out of nowhere, sword swinging for Ronan's head. The Alpha moved with inhuman speed, catching the blade on his forearm. The silver cut deep, but Ronan did not even flinch. He grabbed Marcus by the throat and lifted him off the ground. No! Evelyn screamed. This one, Ronan said, still holding Marcus. I'll make quick. Professional courtesy for years of service. Wait, Evelyn begged. Please, let him go. I'll do whatever you want. I'll stop fighting. I'll disappear. Just let him live. Ronan looked at her, then at Marcus, then back at her. No, he said simply. He snapped Marcus's neck with one twist. The sound was sharp and final. The man who had followed Evelyn into the wilderness, who had believed in her plan, who had been loyal when everyone else betrayed her, dropped into the snow like discarded meat. Evelyn's scream was not human. It was pure wolf, pure anguish, the sound of something breaking so completely it could never be repaired. Ronan let her scream, let her rage, let her exhaust herself against the hands holding her until she had nothing left but tears and the bitter taste of failure. Take her south, he said to the enforcers. I want her alive. She's going to watch what happens to rogues who follow false prophets. They dragged her away from the burning settlement, away from the bodies, away from the life she had tried and failed to build. Behind her, Gareth fought until he was overwhelmed. Kira died with a blade in each hand. Mira's fate was unknown, lost somewhere in the northern wilderness with whoever had managed to escape. And Lily, small, fierce Lily, who had wanted to be a warrior and protect her friends. Evelyn did not know if she had made it out with Marcus before he died. Did not know if that small girl was alive or dead or alone in the frozen mountains. The not knowing was almost worse than seeing the bodies. They traveled for 2 days, Evelyn bound and gagged in the back of a supply wagon. The enforcers did not speak to her, did not explain where they were taking her, just transported her like cargo, something valuable enough to protect but not important enough to respect. On the 3rd day, they reached a fortress she recognized. Not Silver Fang territory, somewhere else, somewhere that made her blood run cold. The stronghold of Alpha King Darius Volkov, the most powerful wolf in the northern kingdoms. The Alpha who had crushed every rival and absorbed every territory that stood against him. The one ruler even Ronan feared. They brought her before him in chains. Darius was nothing like she expected. Mid-50s, gray hair cut military short, face scarred from a lifetime of combat. He sat on a throne carved from a single piece of black stone, surrounded by warriors who looked like they could tear apart armies. But his eyes were what stopped her. Not cruel, not sadistic, just infinitely calculating. The eyes of a man who saw everything and everyone as pieces on a board. "Evelyn Drake," he said. His voice was quiet, controlled, more dangerous than shouting. "I've heard a great deal about you." Evelyn said nothing. What was there to say? "Ronan Blackwood brought you to me as a gift," Darius continued. "Proof of his effectiveness in eliminating threats to territorial stability. He expects me to execute you publicly as an example." "Then do it," Evelyn said. Her voice was hollow. "Get it over with." Darius studied her for a long moment. "You led rogues against established pacts, sabotaged supply lines, killed enforcers. By every law we have, you should die." "I know, and yet." Darius stood, descending from his throne. He moved like a predator, every step deliberate. "You also organized 300 desperate wolves into something resembling an army in less than a month. You inspired loyalty in people who had every reason to distrust you. You developed tactical plans that, had they been executed, might actually have caused serious damage." Evelyn looked up at him. "What's your point?" "My point is that you're wasted as a corpse. You have skills I can use. Intelligence, strategy, the ability to make people believe in impossible things." He wanted to recruit her. The realization was so absurd, Evelyn almost laughed. "You killed everyone I cared about, and now you want me to work for you?" "I killed enemies of the state," Darius corrected. "There's a difference. And I'm not asking you to work for me out of loyalty or affection. I'm offering you a choice. Die here and now, your rebellion ending in complete failure, or live and actually accomplish something with the rage you're carrying." Evelyn's chains rattled as she clenched her fists. "What kind of choice is that?" "The only kind that matters. Survival or principle. You can die pure and accomplish nothing, or you can compromise and maybe eventually change things from the inside." "There's no changing things from the inside," Evelyn said bitterly. "That's what I told myself for 9 years with Ronan. Look where it got me." "Because you were never really inside," Darius said. "You were a Luna, a decoration, a political asset. I'm offering you actual power, a position in my war council, access to resources and information, the ability to influence policy. Why would you do that?" "Because I'm not an idiot." Darius returned to his throne. "The old system is failing. Territorial consolidation has gone as far as it can. The rogues are getting bolder, the resistance is growing, and every alpha is too proud to admit we need to change tactics. I need people who think differently, who understand both sides." Evelyn laughed, a broken sound. "You want me to help you oppress the wolves I was trying to save? I want you to help me create a system where wolves like you don't have to choose between submission and death. It's not perfect, it's not justice, but it's better than what we have now." The offer hung in the air between them. Evelyn's mind raced, looking for the trap, the hidden blade, the moment where this became another betrayal. But she found nothing, just a calculated offer from a calculated man who saw her as useful. She thought about Marcus, about Lily, about all the wolves who had died believing she could change something. If she died here, they died for nothing. Their sacrifice meant nothing. The system that had crushed them would continue unchanged. But if she lived, if she took this devil's bargain and survived long enough to find real leverage, maybe she could still accomplish something. Not the clean victory she had imagined, not the righteous rebellion, but something. "You're asking me to become exactly what I fought against," Evelyn said. "I'm asking you to survive long enough to fight smarter," Darius said. "The question is whether your pride is more important than your goals." Evelyn closed her eyes, saw Marcus's broken neck, saw the settlement burning, saw Lily's face as she screamed for her dead mother, saw the future where she died here and nothing changed, and it all happened again to the next generation. She opened her eyes and looked at the Alpha King who had destroyed everything she had built. "What would I have to do?" she asked. Darius smiled. It was not a kind smile, but it was honest. "Everything I tell you," he said, "without question, without hesitation. You'll serve me the way you served Ronan, Except this time you'll do it knowing exactly what you're sacrificing and why. And in return, you live, you learn, you position yourself. And someday, when you're strong enough and smart enough and ruthless enough, maybe you get your revenge. Just not today. The choice was no choice at all. Death or compromise. Principle or survival. Evelyn had spent her whole life trying to be good, to be honorable, to fight the right way, and it had gotten everyone she loved killed. Maybe it was time to try something different, something darker, something that required her to become the very thing she hated in order to eventually destroy it. She looked at Darius Volkov, the most powerful alpha in the kingdoms, and spoke the words that would damn her soul but keep her breathing. I accept. The War Council chamber was built for intimidation. Black stone walls that swallowed light. A table carved from a single slab of granite that weighed more than 3 grown wolves. Chairs positioned to remind everyone exactly where they stood in the hierarchy. Evelyn had attended 47 meetings in this room over the past 18 months, and every single one had been a masterclass in controlled violence masquerading as diplomacy. Today would be different. She stood at Darius's right hand, the position she had earned through blood and calculation and the systematic destruction of everything she used to believe about honor. The other council members watched her with expressions ranging from grudging respect to barely concealed contempt. She was still the outsider, still the rogue Luna who had murdered her way into a seat at the most powerful table in the northern kingdoms. But she was also the architect of 3 successful territorial acquisitions and the primary strategist behind the consolidation of the western provinces. Darius had given her power, and she had used it with the kind of ruthless efficiency that made wolves forget she had ever been anything other than his weapon. The reports came in steady and brutal. Territory gains in the south, successful suppression of a rogue uprising in the eastern mountains. Trade routes secured through calculated displays of overwhelming force. The machine of empire grinding forward, crushing everything beneath it. Evelyn listened and took notes and contributed tactical observations that made the conquest more efficient. Every word tasted like ash. Every suggestion was another betrayal of the wolves she had promised to protect. But she was still breathing, still learning, still positioning herself for the moment when she could burn this entire system to the ground. The meeting was almost over when the messenger arrived. A young wolf, barely 20, with the kind of terror in his eyes that came from bearing news no one wanted to hear. "Speak," Darius said without looking up from the territorial maps. The messenger swallowed hard. "My lord, there's been an incident on the northern border, a coordinated attack on 3 of our supply depots. Military precision. No survivors." The room went silent. Darius's hand stopped moving across the map. He looked up slowly, his expression utterly calm in the way that made seasoned warriors start planning their funerals. "Rogues?" he asked quietly. "We believe so, my lord, but not like any rogue pack we've encountered. They knew exactly where to strike, exactly when the patrols would rotate. They had intelligence that should have been impossible to obtain." Darius's eyes slid to Evelyn. She felt the weight of that gaze like a physical thing, pressing against her chest, searching for any sign of deception or hidden loyalty. She met his eyes without flinching, showed him nothing but professional interest and tactical calculation. The mask she had spent 18 months perfecting. "How many casualties?" she asked the messenger. 43 enforcers dead." The boy's voice shook. "And they left a message, carved into the wall of the main depot." "What did it say?" The messenger looked at Darius for permission. The Alpha King nodded once. It said, "The Drake remembers." The room erupted. Council members shouting over each other, demanding investigations and retaliations, and the immediate execution of anyone with Drake family connections. Evelyn sat perfectly still, her heart hammering against her ribs, her mind racing through implications and possibilities, and the dawning realization that someone was using her name to wage war. "Silence," Darius said. The room went quiet instantly. He stood, his presence filling the space until it felt like the walls were closing in. Clear the room. Everyone except Evelyn. The council members fled. Smart wolves knew when to disappear. Within seconds, only Evelyn and Darius remained, facing each other across the granite table like chess players studying the board. Darius walked to the window, looking out over his capital city. Thousands of wolves living under his rule, believing in the security his strength provided. He was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke without turning around. "Did you plan this?" "No," Evelyn said. Her voice was steady, clinical, the voice of someone who had nothing to hide. "I've been in this city for 18 months. Every move I make is watched. Every conversation is monitored. You know that better than anyone. Knowledge and certainty are different things." Darius turned to face her. "Someone is using your family name to inspire resistance. Either you're complicit or you've become a symbol you can't control. Both scenarios are problematic." Evelyn stood, matching his intensity. "If I wanted to betray you, I would have done it months ago when you gave me access to supply routes and patrol schedules. I could have fed information to the rogues, could have sabotaged operations from the inside. I didn't, because I gave you my word. Words are cheap. Then what do you want from me? A blood oath? My wolf bound to yours? Tell me what it takes to prove I'm committed to this and I'll do it." Darius studied her with those calculating eyes that saw through every lie and half-truth. "What I want is for you to lead the response. Take a strike force north, find whoever is using your name, eliminate them." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "You want me to hunt rogues. I want you to prove where your loyalty lies, in front of the entire council, in front of every wolf who thinks you're a traitor waiting for the right moment to strike. And if I refuse, then I'll know you've been playing me from the beginning, and I'll have you executed before sunset." The choice was elegant in its cruelty. Hunt down wolves who were fighting the same battles she had once believed in, or die for principles that had already gotten everyone she loved killed. Evelyn thought about Marcus, about the settlement burning, about 18 months of swallowing her rage and pretending to be something she hated. She thought about the message carved into that depot wall. The Drake remembers. Someone out there still believed, still fought, still used her name like it meant something. And Darius wanted her to put a blade through their throat. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow at dawn. You'll have 50 enforcers under your command. Complete authority to do whatever is necessary. Bring me results or don't come back." "Understood." Darius returned to the window. "One more thing. I'm sending someone with you, an observer, to verify your actions." "Who?" The door opened. Evelyn turned. Ronan Blackwood stepped into the room. He looked exactly the same. Storm cloud eyes, granite jaw, the bearing of a wolf who had never questioned his right to power. He met Evelyn's gaze with something that might have been amusement or might have been contempt. 18 months since the massacre. 18 months since he had killed Marcus and burned the settlement and handed her to Darius like a trophy. And now he would watch her hunt the only wolves still fighting in her name. "Ronan will accompany your strike force," Darius said. "He has experience with rogue tactics and knows the northern territories. His presence will also demonstrate unity among the Alpha Coalition." Translation: Ronan would make sure Evelyn did not betray them, would kill her himself if she showed any sign of wavering. "Perfect," Evelyn said. Her voice was ice. "When do we leave?" "Dawn," Ronan said. His voice was exactly as she remembered. Flat, businesslike. The tone of a man discussing supply schedules instead of the hunt for wolves whose only crime was refusing to submit. "We'll brief the strike force at sunrise." He left without another word. Evelyn stood alone with Darius, the weight of tomorrow's mission pressing down on her like a collapsing mountain. "I know what you're thinking," Darius said quietly. "You're thinking about running, about warning whoever is out there, about choosing loyalty to dead ideals over practical survival." Evelyn said nothing. "Don't," Darius continued. "Because if you run, I won't just kill you. I'll use you as an example. I'll make your execution so brutal, so public, so utterly final that every rogue in the North will know exactly what happens to wolves who choose rebellion over reason." He turned to face her fully. "But if you complete this mission, if you prove your loyalty beyond question, I'll give you something you want. Information about survivors from the settlement. Names, locations, proof that some of them are still alive." Evelyn's breath caught. "You knew there were survivors?" "I know everything. That's why I rule and others serve. Complete the mission. Bring me results. And I'll give you what you need to stop wondering if that little girl you tried to save died alone in the snow." Lily. He was talking about Lily. The manipulation was so blatant it should have been insulting, but it was also devastatingly effective, because Evelyn would do almost anything for proof that child was still breathing. I'll complete the mission, she said. Good. Darius returned to his maps. Dismissed. Evelyn left the War Council chamber and walked through corridors she had come to know intimately, past guards who nodded respectfully, past servants who stepped aside to let her pass, past all the trappings of power she had earned by becoming exactly what she swore she would never be. Her quarters were in the Eastern Tower, a suite of rooms that would have seemed luxurious to the woman she used to be. Now they just felt like a well-appointed cage. She locked the door and stood in the center of the room, breathing hard, fighting the urge to shift and tear everything apart. A knock. She almost ignored it, but the knock came again, insistent. She opened the door. Kira stood in the hallway, alive, scarred, missing her left arm from the elbow down, but alive. They had found each other 6 months ago in a marketplace, both too shocked to speak, both pretending to be strangers until they could find somewhere safe to talk. Kira had survived the settlement massacre by pure luck, escaping into the wilderness with a dozen others. She had made her way south through sheer determination, ending up in Darius's capital, working as a laborer in the industrial district. She was Evelyn's only remaining connection to the wolves she had tried to save. The only person in this entire city who knew what Evelyn was really planning. Kira slipped inside and Evelyn locked the door behind her. I heard, Kira said without preamble, you're leading the strike force north. Yes. And Ronan is going with you. Yes. Kira's jaw tightened. This is the trap. You know that. Darius doesn't trust you. This is him forcing you to prove yourself by destroying the only thing that still carries your family's name. I know, Evelyn said. So what are you going to do? Evelyn walked to the window, looking out over the city. The same view Darius had. Thousands of lives. Thousands of wolves who believed in the security his empire provided. And beneath it all, the hidden currents of resistance. The rogues who would never submit. The exiles who remembered when loyalty meant something other than fear. The message said, The Drake remembers, Evelyn said quietly. Someone is out there fighting in my name, using my family's legacy to inspire resistance. And you're being sent to kill them, or to join them. Kira moved to stand beside her. You can't be serious. The moment you show your hand, Ronan will execute you. You'll die before you can warn them. Maybe, Evelyn said. Or maybe that's exactly what needs to happen. Maybe I've been playing Darius's game for too long. Maybe it's time to stop surviving and start fighting. That's suicide. Probably. But Kira, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending. I can't hunt down wolves who are doing what I should have been doing all along. So you're going to throw away 18 months of planning for a gesture? For symbolism? I'm going to make a choice, Evelyn said. The one I should have made a long time ago. I'm going to stop being the weapon Darius wants and become the one the rogues need. Kira was quiet for a long moment. Then she laughed, a bitter sound. You're insane. Completely. And you're probably going to get us all killed. Almost certainly. Kira shook her head, but there was something like pride in her expression. All right, what do you need from me? Evelyn turned to face her. I need you to get a message north. To whoever is leading the resistance. Tell them Evelyn Drake is coming at dawn with 50 enforcers and Ronan Blackwood. Tell them to be ready. Ready for what? For a reckoning. The strike force assembled at dawn. 50 of Darius's best enforcers, armed with silver weapons and the kind of cold discipline that made them terrifying in combat. They moved like a machine, every wolf knowing their role, every action coordinated with brutal efficiency. Ronan briefed them with clinical precision. The mission was simple. Track the rogues who had attacked the supply depots. Eliminate them. Leave no survivors. Send a message that resistance was futile and betrayal was fatal. Evelyn stood beside him, her expression neutral, her heart racing. Kira had gotten the message out last night through networks Evelyn had spent months building. Rogue sympathizers in the city. Wolves who remembered the Drake name. A chain of trust that led north into the wilderness where the resistance was gathering. If the message had gotten through, the rogues would know she was coming, would be prepared. If it had not gotten through, Evelyn was leading 50 enforcers straight into a slaughter. Either way, she was committed now. They rode north into territory Evelyn recognized with painful clarity. The same mountains where she had fled 18 months ago. The same frozen wilderness where she had tried to build an army and failed. The same trees that had hidden wolves who believed her promises. The memories were crushing, but she pushed them down and focused on the mission, on the moment when everything would break and she would have to choose between survival and principles one final time. They found the first sign of the rogues 3 hours into the journey, a marker carved into a tree trunk, the Drake family crest with a wolf's head crowned with stars. "Fresh," one of the enforcers said, examining the carving. "Maybe an hour old." "They're close," Ronan said. "Spread out, standard hunting formation." The enforcers moved with practiced efficiency, forming a net designed to trap anything that tried to escape. Evelyn rode beside Ronan, hyper-aware of his every movement, knowing he was watching her just as carefully. "You're quiet," Ronan said. "Just focused." "On what?" "Killing the wolves who worship your name?" "That must be conflicting." Evelyn met his eyes. "You would know all about killing wolves who trust you." Something flickered in his expression. Might have been regret. Might have been irritation. He looked away. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I never wanted it to end the way it did. You snapped Marcus's neck in front of me. He was going to kill me. He was trying to protect me," Evelyn said. "From you, from this, from becoming exactly what I've become. And what's that? A weapon, just like you wanted." Ronan was silent for a moment. "I wanted a partner, someone who understood the game. You chose to play martyr instead. I chose to fight for wolves who couldn't fight for themselves." "And where did that get you?" Ronan's voice was hard now. "Everyone you loved is dead. Everyone who believed in you got slaughtered. You accomplished nothing except giving Darius a tool he could use to hunt down the very wolves you tried to save." The words landed like physical blows because they were true. Every single syllable was the bitter truth Evelyn had been swallowing for 18 months. "You're right," she said quietly. "I failed, completely, utterly. Every decision I made led to more death. So why keep fighting? Why not accept that the system is what it is and find a way to survive within it? Because survival isn't enough anymore." The attack came without warning. Arrows from the trees, silver-tipped, fired by wolves who knew exactly where to aim. 3 enforcers went down in the first volley, screaming as the silver burned through flesh. "Ambush!" Ronan shouted. "Defensive formation!" But the enforcers were already dying. More arrows, wolves dropping from branches with knives in rage. A coordinated assault that spoke of military training and desperate fury. And at the center of it, leading the charge, was a figure Evelyn recognized. Gareth Stoneclaw. Alive, scarred worse than before, missing an eye, but alive and fighting with the ferocity of a wolf who had nothing left to lose. Their eyes met across the chaos. He knew. Somehow, he knew this was a setup, that Evelyn had sent the message, that this was not a hunt but a reckoning. Ronan was shouting orders, rallying the enforcers, but the rogues had every advantage. They knew the terrain, they had prepared the killing ground. They were fighting for survival while the enforcers were just following orders. The battle was brutal and close and utterly chaotic. Evelyn drew her blade. Ronan expected her to fight beside him, to prove her loyalty by cutting down rogues. She turned and drove the blade through the throat of the enforcer closest to her. The man went down, eyes wide with shock and betrayal. Blood sprayed hot across Evelyn's face. She yanked the blade free and moved to the next target, cutting through enforcers with the same efficiency she had learned serving Darius. "Traitor!" Ronan roared. He came at her with the fury of a betrayed alpha. His wolf partially shifted, claws extended, murder in his eyes. Evelyn met him head-on, 18 months of suppressed rage finally unleashed. They collided with bone-breaking force. Evelyn was smaller, weaker, slower. But she fought with the desperate brilliance of someone who had been planning this moment for a year and a half. She used every dirty trick Gareth had taught her. Went for eyes and throat and joints. Gave up defense for pure offense because survival was not the goal anymore. Ronan caught her across the ribs with a backhand that cracked bones. Pain exploded through her chest. She kept fighting. "You stupid bitch," Ronan snarled. "You could have had everything, power, position, a place in the new order." "I don't want a place in your order," Evelyn gasped. "I want to burn it down." She drove her blade toward his heart. He caught her wrist, twisting until bones ground together. The knife fell from her grip. Then Gareth was there, slamming into Ronan from the side. The 2 alphas went down in a tangle of claws and fury. Other rogues swarmed over the remaining enforcers, overwhelming them through sheer numbers and ferocity. Evelyn staggered, trying to breathe through broken ribs. Blood ran from a dozen wounds. Her vision swam, but she was still standing. Someone grabbed her arm. Kira. Somehow, Kira was here, one-armed and fierce. "We need to go," Kira shouted over the sounds of battle. "Before reinforcements arrive. Not without Gareth. He's already moving. Come on!" They ran. Evelyn's body screamed protest, but she forced herself forward. Behind them, the sounds of fighting grew distant. Ahead, deeper into the mountains, safety or death, or something in between. Gareth caught up to them a quarter-mile later, bleeding from a dozen wounds but alive. With him were maybe 20 rogues, all that remained of a force that had once numbered 100. They did not slow down, did not stop to treat wounds or catch their breath, just ran deeper into the wilderness, following paths only rogues knew, heading for sanctuaries hidden so deep the enforcers would never find them. Hours later, when they finally stopped in a cave system that offered shelter and defensibility, Gareth turned to face Evelyn. "You sent the message," he said. "Yes." "You betrayed Darius." "Yes." "He'll hunt you for the rest of your life. You know that." "I know." Gareth studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, a terrible expression that was more scar tissue than joy. "Welcome back, Luna. We've been waiting for you." The small group of survivors gathered in the cave, a pathetic remnant of the resistance. Evelyn looked at their faces. Wolves who had lost everything. Wolves who had kept fighting anyway. Wolves who still believed her name meant something. She thought about Darius's offer, information about Lily in exchange for hunting rogues. That was gone now. She would never know if the child had survived. She thought about the 18 months she had spent pretending to be someone else. All that careful positioning and strategic patience thrown away for one moment of defiance. She thought about Marcus and her mother and everyone who had died believing in principles that seemed worthless in the face of overwhelming power. And she realized something that should have been obvious all along. Sometimes survival was not enough. Sometimes you had to choose the doomed fight over the safe compromise. Sometimes you had to burn your carefully built life to the ground and stand in the ashes holding a blade. Not because it was smart or strategic or likely to succeed, but because it was the only way to live with yourself. Evelyn looked at Gareth and the other rogues who had just thrown away any chance of peace or safety to fight beside her. "All right," she said. Her voice was steady despite the pain radiating from her broken ribs. "We just declared war on the most powerful alpha in the northern kingdoms. We're outnumbered, at least 100 to 1. Every enforcer in the territory will be hunting us. We have no supplies, no territory, no chance of conventional victory." She smiled, and it was the most honest expression her face had worn in 18 months. "So let's make it hurt." Outside the cave, the sun was setting. Somewhere to the south, Darius would be receiving word of the failed mission. Ronan would be explaining how Evelyn had betrayed them. The War Council would be planning retribution. Let them come. Evelyn Drake had spent 18 months learning everything she could about the Empire's weaknesses, about supply routes and command structures and the hidden fractures in the Alpha Coalition. She had learned how to survive by becoming a weapon. Now she would use that knowledge to burn the entire system down. The real war was just beginning. The war lasted 7 months, not the grand campaigns of legend with armies clashing in open fields. This was guerrilla warfare at its most brutal. Evelyn and her rogues struck from shadows, bled the Empire through 1,000 cuts, then vanished into mountains that swallowed pursuit whole. They hit supply convoys heading south, burned armories in the dead of night, freed prisoners being transported to execution sites. Every strike was surgical, calculated to maximize damage while minimizing casualties on both sides. Because Evelyn had learned something in her 18 months serving Darius, the enforcers were not the enemy. They were just wolves following orders, same as she had been. The real enemy was the system that turned wolves into weapons and called it civilization. Darius responded with the overwhelming force he was known for. Entire battalions deployed to hunt down packs that numbered less than 50. Bounties placed on Evelyn's head so high that wolves, who had never cared about politics, suddenly became hunters. The northern territories became a war zone where trust was lethal and every stranger might be an assassin. But for every rogue killed, 2 more appeared. Wolves who had been hiding. Wolves who had been waiting. Wolves who heard that Evelyn Drake was alive and fighting and decided that maybe, just maybe, submission was not the only option. The resistance grew despite the casualties, or maybe because of them. Dead martyrs inspired more fury than living leaders ever could. Evelyn directed operations from caves and abandoned settlements, constantly moving, never sleeping in the same place twice. Her body became a map of scars, silver burns that never fully healed, broken bones that set crooked, the physical cost of war written in flesh and pain. But it was the internal cost that truly changed her. She had thought she understood sacrifice when she fled into the mountains 18 months ago, had thought she knew what it meant to give everything for a cause. She had been wrong. Sacrifice was not one grand gesture. It was 1,000 small deaths. Watching wolves die following your orders, sending friends into battles they would not survive. Making choices where every option led to suffering and picking the one that hurt least. Leadership was not glory. It was carrying the weight of every failure until your spine threatened to snap. Gareth understood this in ways Evelyn was still learning. He had been leading rogues for 2 decades, watching pack after pack get destroyed, rebuilding from survivors who had nowhere else to go. He taught her how to make the hard calls, how to evaluate risks with cold calculation, how to mourn quickly and move on because stopping meant dying. One night, 3 months into the war, they sat together in a cave watching younger wolves sleep. Kira was among them, her exhaustion so complete she did not even twitch when rocks fell nearby. "You're getting good at this," Gareth said quietly. "Too good." Evelyn was cleaning her blade, the repetitive motion soothing. At what? Getting wolves killed? At making the choices no one else can make. At carrying the weight so others don't have to. That's not a skill I wanted to develop. Nobody wants it. But some of us don't get a choice. Evelyn set down her blade and looked at him. "Do you ever regret it? Leading the resistance instead of just finding somewhere safe and hiding?" "Every single day," Gareth said without hesitation. "Every wolf who dies, I think about how they would still be alive if I had just kept my head down and survived. So why keep fighting? Because hiding is not the same as living. And because someone has to stand up and say, this is not acceptable, even if it costs everything." Evelyn understood that truth in her bones now. Understood that some fights were worth having even when you knew you would lose. Because the alternative was accepting a world where power justified cruelty and submission was the price of safety. She would rather die free than live as property. The turning point came in the 5th month. Evelyn's scouts brought intelligence that Darius was consolidating forces for a final push. 50,000 wolves, the largest army the northern kingdoms had ever assembled. They would sweep through the mountains with overwhelming numbers, driving the resistance toward the frozen wastes where survival was impossible. It was a sound strategy, brutal and efficient. Exactly what Evelyn would have advised if she were still sitting on the war council. The rogues numbered maybe 800 by this point. Well-trained, motivated, absolutely doomed in a direct confrontation. Gareth called a meeting of pack leaders in their largest sanctuary, a network of caves deep enough to hide their numbers. Wolves came from across the territories, faces Evelyn recognized, and many she did not. The resistance had grown beyond anything she had imagined, but 800 against 50,000 was still suicide. "We can't win this," one of the leaders said bluntly. "Not in open combat. We need to scatter, go underground, wait for another opportunity." "And let Darius claim victory?" another argued. "Let him parade our cowardice as proof that resistance is futile?" The argument raged. Evelyn listened, watching dynamics, reading the room. These wolves were exhausted, traumatized. They had lost friends and family and territory. They had sacrificed everything for a cause that was about to be crushed, and they were looking to her for answers she did not have. Finally, she stood. The cave went quiet. "Gareth is right," she said. "We can't win in open combat, but we're not trying to win battles. We're trying to change minds." Confusion rippled through the gathering. Evelyn moved to the crude map spread across a stone table, tracing routes and territories with her finger. "Darius is bringing 50,000 wolves north. That's almost his entire military force, which means the capital is vulnerable. The southern territories are undefended. Everything he has built is exposed." "You're suggesting we attack the capital," someone said. "That's insane." "I'm suggesting we give him a choice," Evelyn corrected. "We send word that we're willing to negotiate." not surrender. Negotiate. Terms for a ceasefire. Protection for rogue packs. Rights and territory in exchange for ending the resistance. He'll never accept, Kira said. He will if the alternative is losing everything. Evelyn met her eyes. We have wolves inside the capital, sympathizers who remember the Drake name. If we coordinate a strike on his supply infrastructure while his army is in the north, we can cripple his ability to maintain control. Force him to choose between hunting us and protecting what he has already claimed. That's not negotiation, Gareth said slowly. That's extortion. It's leverage, Evelyn said, and it's the only way this ends without complete annihilation. The plan was risky to the point of madness, splitting their forces when Darius was bringing overwhelming strength, betting everything on sympathizers who might betray them, trusting that Darius would value his empire more than his pride. But it was also the only option that did not end with 800 wolves dying in the snow while accomplishing nothing. The vote was close, but it passed. They had 2 weeks to prepare, 2 weeks to coordinate with cells inside the capital, 2 weeks to position strike teams and prepare for the moment when everything would either fall into place or collapse into chaos. Evelyn barely slept. She wrote letters to wolves she had never met, calling in favors from sympathizers who remembered her mother. She studied maps until the roots were burned into her brain. She trained until her body was one continuous ache. And late at night, when everyone else was sleeping, she allowed herself to think about the cost. About Marcus and Lily and everyone who had died believing her promises. About the fact that this final gambit would probably get more wolves killed. About the crushing weight of responsibility that came with asking others to risk everything for your plan. Kira found her one such night, sitting alone on a cliff edge overlooking the frozen wilderness. You're thinking too much, Kira said, settling beside her despite the cold. Someone has to. Gareth does enough thinking for all of us. You need to rest. I'll rest when this is over. Kira was quiet for a moment. Do you really think this will work? Honestly? I don't know, but I know doing nothing is certain death. At least this way we have a chance. Is a chance enough? When the cost is this high? Evelyn looked at her friend, this wolf who had survived the massacre and rebuilt herself into something fierce and unbreakable. Has to be, because hope is all we have left. The coordinated strikes happened on the same night Darius's army reached the northern border. Evelyn led a team into the capital herself, using contacts and knowledge from her 18 months inside to navigate defenses she had helped design. They hit 3 major supply depots simultaneously, not with overwhelming force, with precision. Sympathetic wolves on the inside opening doors, quick strikes that destroyed months of stockpiled resources, then vanishing before response teams could organize. The capital erupted into chaos. Evelyn watched from a rooftop as enforcers scrambled, confusion spreading like wildfire. The mighty empire reduced to panic because someone had punched through their arrogance. But the cost was immediate and brutal. 2 of her strike teams got caught. Wolves she knew, wolves she had trained with. They died buying time for others to escape. Evelyn forced herself to watch, forced herself to remember their faces, to carry the weight of ordering them into battles they did not survive. This was leadership. This was the price of resistance. She made it back to the rendezvous point with her team intact, but her soul fractured. Gareth was waiting with news from the north. Darius had received their message. The one Evelyn had sent through channels she trusted, laying out terms for negotiation. He had not responded with words. He had turned his army around and was marching back to the capital at forced pace. He's coming, Gareth said, and he's bringing everything. Good, Evelyn said. Let him come. The final confrontation happened not on a battlefield, but in the ruins of Evelyn's ancestral home. The Drake family estate, burned during the Consolidation Wars, now little more than stone foundations and memories. Darius chose the location deliberately, a reminder of what happened to bloodlines that resisted. Evelyn chose to meet him there for the same reason. She stood in what had once been her family's great hall, now open to the sky, walls blackened with old fire. Behind her, 50 wolves, veterans. The best fighters the resistance had. Not an army, just enough to make a statement. Darius arrived with 1,000, a show of force that made his position clear. He could end this whenever he wanted. The only reason Evelyn was still breathing was because he allowed it. He approached alone, his warriors fanning out but not advancing. The Alpha King walked through the ruins like he owned them, which legally he did. Everything the Drake family had built now belonged to his empire. He stopped 10 feet from Evelyn, studying her with those calculating eyes that had measured and dismissed countless enemies. "You've cost me considerably," he said. "Resources, territory, political capital. The other alphas are questioning whether I can control my own lands." "Good," Evelyn said. "That's your response? After everything? Just good? You built an empire on fear and submission. I wanted you to know what it feels like to be vulnerable. To have your security threatened by wolves you dismissed as irrelevant." Darius almost smiled. "And now? You stand in the ruins of your family's legacy with 50 wolves facing 1,000. What exactly do you think you've accomplished?" "I've proven you can bleed," Evelyn said. "That's enough." "Is it? Because from where I stand, you've sacrificed hundreds of lives for symbolism, for the empty gesture of resistance that changes nothing." The words cut deep because they echoed Evelyn's own doubts. The night she lay awake counting casualties, the faces of wolves who died following her orders, the weight of all that death for a cause that might accomplish nothing. But she had learned something in 7 months of guerrilla warfare, something about the nature of power and the value of defiance. "You're wrong," she said quietly. "Change is not measured in territory gained or battles won. It's measured in what people believe is possible. Before this, rogues hid in the mountains waiting to die. Now they know they can fight back. Now they know your empire is not invincible. That legacy will outlive both of us." Darius's expression shifted, something that might have been respect or might have been regret. "You sound like your mother. I'll take that as a compliment." He sighed, a sound that carried the weight of decades. "I didn't come here to kill you, Evelyn. I came to offer you one final choice. I'm listening. Join me. Not as a subordinate, as an equal. Help me rebuild the empire into something better. You've proven you understand power. Use that understanding to create the world you want instead of dying for a dream that will never happen." Evelyn looked at him, this alpha who had offered her the same choice twice now. Survival in exchange for compromise, power in exchange for principles. She thought about her mother, who died fighting for wolves who could not fight for themselves. About Marcus, who followed her into the wilderness knowing it would probably kill him. About every rogue who chose freedom over safety. About the fact that some things were worth more than breathing. "No," she said simply. Darius nodded slowly, like he had expected that answer. "Then I suppose we're done here." He raised his hand. His warriors tensed, preparing to attack. Evelyn's wolves gripped their weapons, 50 against 1,000. A slaughter waiting to happen. But before anyone could move, another voice cut through the tension. "Stand down!" Every head turned. Ronan Blackwood walked through the ruins, flanked by his own warriors. But he was not looking at Evelyn. He was looking at Darius. "What are you doing?" Darius demanded. "Ending this," Ronan said. He moved to stand between the two forces, his presence commanding despite the fact that he was outnumbered. "I've been watching this war for 7 months. Watching resources bleed, watching wolves die, watching the alliance fracture because you're so focused on crushing one woman that you've neglected everything else." "Careful," Darius said quietly. "I'm done being careful," Ronan said, "and I'm done watching you drag the entire Northern Kingdom into a war that benefits no one. The other alphas agree with me. We're withdrawing support for your campaign." The words landed like thunderbolts. Evelyn's heart raced as she processed the implications. The Alpha Coalition fracturing, Darius's power base collapsing. Ronan turned to face her then, and the expression in his eyes was complicated. Regret and respect, and something that might have been apology. "I was wrong about you," he said. "I thought you were playing at Revolution, that you would break when things got hard. But you didn't break. You built something real from nothing, made wolves believe in something other than survival." "This isn't forgiveness," Evelyn said coldly. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm offering recognition. You won. Not the way you wanted, not with clean victory and justice, but you changed the game. That's more than most wolves accomplish in a lifetime." Darius watched this exchange with the stillness of a predator calculating odds. Finally, he spoke. "You understand what you're doing? Fracturing the alliance will plunge the territories into chaos." "Maybe," Ronan said, Or maybe it will force us to build something better, something where rogues don't have to choose between hiding and dying, where lunas are not traded like property, where strength is measured in more than just who can inflict the most violence. He looked at Evelyn. I stole your family's territory, destroyed your life, killed wolves you loved. I can't undo any of that, but I can stop making the same mistakes, can help build the world you were fighting for. Evelyn wanted to reject him, wanted to remember Marcus's broken neck and the settlement burning and all the reasons why Ronan deserved nothing but her blade through his throat. But she thought about what she had told Darius, about how change was measured in what people believed possible, about how revolution was not one person's vengeance, but a shift in collective consciousness. And she thought about her mother, who had built alliances with former enemies because the goal was bigger than personal grudges. What exactly are you offering? She asked. Territory for rogue packs, Ronan said. Protected lands where wolves can live without submitting to alpha rule. Representation in territorial councils. Laws that prevent lunas from being exiled or traded without consent. And in return, the resistance stops attacking infrastructure. We negotiate instead of destroying each other. We try to build something that does not require constant bloodshed to maintain. It was not perfect, not justice, just the messy compromise of politics where no one got everything they wanted, but maybe, just maybe, everyone got enough to stop killing each other. Evelyn looked at Gareth, at Kira, at the wolves who had followed her through 7 months of hell. They were exhausted, traumatized, ready for this to be over. She looked at Darius, whose empire was fracturing, whose power was evaporating because the other alphas had finally realized that unity was optional. And she made the choice that strategy demanded, even though her heart screamed for vengeance. I want it in writing, she said, signed by every alpha in the coalition. Protected territory with clear borders, rogue representation in all major decisions affecting their lands, and amnesty for every wolf who fought in the resistance. Agreed, Ronan said. Darius's expression was unreadable. You're making a mistake. Both of you. This idealistic experiment will collapse within a year. Maybe, Evelyn said, but it's a better mistake than perpetual war. The treaty was signed 3 weeks later in neutral territory. Every major alpha in attendance, witnesses to the agreement that would reshape the northern kingdoms. Evelyn stood as representative of the rogue packs, her signature carrying the weight of every wolf who had died believing in her promises. It was not a happy occasion. Too much blood under the bridge. Too many memories of wolves who should have been there but were not. Marcus. Lily's mother. Hundreds of others whose names Evelyn carried like stones. But it was an ending, and sometimes endings were enough. The months that followed were harder than the war in some ways. Implementing the treaty, negotiating boundaries, handling wolves on both sides who felt betrayed by compromise. Evelyn learned that building was infinitely more difficult than destroying. She established the first official rogue settlement on land that had once belonged to her family, built structures that could withstand winters, created systems for dispute resolution and resource distribution, proved that wolves could govern themselves without alpha oversight. Gareth helped, his experience invaluable. Kira became the settlement's primary defender, training younger wolves in tactics that had kept the resistance alive. Other rogues came, cautious at first, then in greater numbers as word spread that there was finally somewhere safe. One evening, 6 months after the treaty, Evelyn was supervising construction when a small group arrived, refugees from the Eastern Territories. She greeted them with the practiced warmth of someone who had done this dozens of times. Then she saw the child among them, Lily, alive. 10 years old now instead of 6, taller, scarred, but unmistakably the girl who had shared her bread on that first night in the mountains. Evelyn's breath stopped. The child looked at her with solemn eyes, recognition dawning slowly. You're her, Lily said quietly. The Luna, the one my old mama told me about. I am, Evelyn managed. I thought you were dead. Almost was, lots of times, but I remembered what you said about being strong, about protecting people. She had survived. Through massacre and winter and years of running, she had survived. Evelyn dropped to her knees and pulled the child into a hug, tears streaming down her face for the first time in months. All the death and sacrifice and compromise suddenly worth it because this one small life had made it through. I'm so sorry, Evelyn whispered. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you. You did, Lily said, her small arms tight around Evelyn's neck. You showed me how to survive. That's protection. Later that night, after Lily was settled with a family who had agreed to foster her, Evelyn stood on the ridge overlooking her settlement. Dozens of structures now where there had been wilderness. Hundreds of wolves building lives where before there had been only hiding. Gareth joined her, his presence steady as always. Not bad, he said, for a failed rebellion. Evelyn almost laughed. Is that what we're calling it? What would you call it? A beginning, she said. Not the one I planned, not the one I wanted, but a beginning nonetheless. Your mother would be proud. The words settled into Evelyn's chest, warm and painful. I don't know about that. I compromised, made deals with wolves who killed people I loved, chose survival over justice. Justice is a luxury, Gareth said. Survival is the foundation everything else is built on. You chose to build instead of burn. That takes more courage than dying for principles. Does it? Sometimes I think dying would have been easier. Of course it would have been easier. Dying is always easier than living with your choices. They stood in comfortable silence, watching smoke rise from cooking fires. Wolves gathering for the evening meal. Children playing in snow that had once hidden bodies. Evelyn thought about the journey that had brought her here. From pampered Luna to exiled rebel to reluctant leader to whatever she was now. Every step had cost something. Every choice had left scars. But she was still standing, still fighting, just in different ways. Ronan visited the settlement a month later. Evelyn almost refused the meeting, but curiosity won over rage. They met in what passed for her office, a simple room with maps and documents and the accumulated weight of administrative work that never ended. He looked older, tired, the kind of exhaustion that came from realizing everything you built was constructed on rotten foundations. Thank you for seeing me, he said. Evelyn did not invite him to sit. What do you want? To apologize. Properly. For everything. Apologies don't bring back the dead, no. They don't. But they're all I have to offer. Evelyn studied him, this man who had been her husband and her destroyer. She waited for the fury to rise, for the urge to drive a blade through his throat. It did not come. There was only exhaustion, the bone-deep weariness of carrying grudges that were too heavy to justify anymore. I don't forgive you, she said quietly. I don't know if I ever will, but I'm tired of hating you. It takes energy I need for other things. That's fair, Ronan said, more than fair. He placed a document on her desk. The deed to her family's original territory. All of it. Returned to the Drake name without condition. I can't undo what I did, he said, but I can stop profiting from it. Evelyn looked at the document. Hundreds of acres. Forests and mountains and rivers her ancestors had protected for generations. Hers again. Why? She asked. Because you were right, Ronan said simply. About everything. About what we were supposed to be, about the cost of choosing power over principles. I spent 9 years married to the smartest wolf I knew, and I was too arrogant to listen. And now? Now I'm trying to build something better. Same as you, it probably won't work, but I have to try. He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. For what it's worth, seeing what you've built here, what you've accomplished despite everything I did to stop you, I'm in awe. You're the leader I pretended to be. Then he was gone, leaving Evelyn alone with a deed that represented everything she had lost and fought to reclaim. She thought about burning it, about rejecting the gesture as too little too late. Instead, she filed it carefully with the other documents that formed the legal foundation of her settlement. Because grudges were heavy, and the future needed foundations more than it needed vengeance. Years passed. The settlement grew into a town. The town grew into a small city. Rogue packs from across the territories came seeking the safety and autonomy Evelyn had fought for. The experiment that Darius predicted would fail within a year lasted 5 years, then 10. Evelyn's hair started showing silver at the temples. Her scars multiplied. Her body carried the permanent damage of too many battles and too little rest. But she woke every morning in a place she had built with her own hands, surrounded by wolves who chose to be there. Lily grew into a fierce young warrior, training under Kira, carrying the legacy of wolves who had died protecting her. She never forgot her first mother or the settlement that burned, but she also did not let that define her future. On the 10th anniversary of the treaty, Evelyn stood before a gathering of pack leaders and rogue representatives. A council that included former enemies sitting side by side, working through disputes with words instead of violence. It was imperfect, messy, full of compromise and frustration and the grinding work of maintaining peace. It was also proof that change was possible, that systems built on fear could be replaced with something better, that wolves could choose cooperation over domination. Evelyn had not saved everyone, had not achieved perfect justice, had made more mistakes than she could count and carried scars that would never fully heal. But she had survived, had built something real from the ashes of her destroyed life, had proven that the woman cast out as worthless could become the foundation of a new way forward. That night, alone in the home she had built on the site of her family's estate, Evelyn pulled out her mother's journal. The leather was worn now, pages soft from repeated reading. She turned to the last entry, the one her mother had written knowing she might not survive. The world breaks us all, but some of us become strong in the broken places. Evelyn added her own line beneath it, her handwriting less elegant but just as determined. And some of us use our broken pieces to build something new. She closed the journal and set it carefully in the family archive, alongside treaties and deeds and documents that told the story of how one woman's exile became a revolution. Outside, wolves howled at the moon, not in mourning or warning, just the sound of lives being lived without fear, of children playing without looking over their shoulders, of a future that was uncertain but at least existed. Evelyn Drake had been a Luna, a rebel, a weapon, a leader, and finally just a woman trying to build something worth the cost it had taken. She had not destroyed the empire, had not achieved perfect victory, had not saved everyone or prevented all suffering, but she had changed what wolves believed was possible, had proven that submission was not the only option, had built foundations for others to continue the work she started. And when the stories were told in later years, when young wolves asked about the woman who made an alpha king negotiate, they would learn this truth. Real power was not in domination, but in the refusal to be broken. Real strength was not in winning every battle, but in surviving long enough to build something better from the ruins. Evelyn Drake had been cast out as worthless, hunted as a traitor, and dismissed as a failed rebel. She had become the Wolf Queen not through conquest but through endurance, not through perfection but through the stubborn refusal to let her broken pieces define her. And that legacy would outlive every alpha who had tried to destroy her. The moon rose full and bright over the settlement, painting everything in silver light. Evelyn stood at her window watching wolves gather for the evening meal, hearing laughter and conversation and the sound of a community that chose to exist. This was her revenge. Not blood or fire or the destruction of enemies, just proof that the woman they tried to erase had built something that would outlast them all. She smiled, the expression carrying the weight of everything she had survived and sacrificed and become. Tomorrow there would be more work, more disputes to mediate, more challenges to face, more wolves who needed proof that change was possible. But tonight, she allowed herself this moment of peace, this recognition that the journey from Broken Luna to Wolf Queen had been worth every scar. The world had tried to break her. Instead, she had used her broken pieces to build a future where other wolves would not have to make the same impossible choices. That was legacy enough. That was victory enough. That was everything.